My stepmother handed me the envelope across my father's mahogany dining table, as if she were offering a receipt for something she had already purchased. Everyone in the room watched her fingers linger on the paper for half a second longer than necessary, just long enough for me to understand that whatever was inside had not been prepared as an inheritance. It had been prepared as a performance. The house was full of people who had spent the morning whispering in corners and pretending their grief had not arrived wearing expensive perfume. My father's portrait stood above the fireplace, surrounded by white lilies, polished silver frames, and the kind of silence that only exists in wealthy families when everyone is waiting to see who gets what. Vivian sat at the head of the table in my father's chair, wearing black silk, pearl earrings, and a face so calm it almost looked rehearsed. She had always known how to make cruelty look like manners. I opened the envelope without looking away from her. Inside was a single dollar bill, folded once in the middle, crisp enough to look new. There was no letter, no explanation, no final message from my father, no handwritten sentence telling me he loved me, despite whatever Vivian had convinced everyone to believe. Just $1 tucked inside cream stationery with my name written across the front in my father's old lawyer's handwriting. For a moment, nobody moved. My aunt lowered her eyes. My cousin Marcus shifted in his seat like he wanted to laugh, but knew the room was too formal for it. Vivian's sister pressed a tissue to her mouth, not because she was crying, but because she wanted to hide her smile. At the far end of the table, Elliot Graves, my father's attorney, remained perfectly still, his fingers resting on top of a leather folder. Vivian tilted her head at me with the soft expression she used whenever there were witnesses. "Your father wanted you to have something symbolic," she said. "He believed in the end that you should learn what things are truly worth." That was the first time I almost reacted. Not because of the dollar, and not because the family was watching me like I was a cracked vase about to fall from a shelf. I almost reacted because Vivian used the exact tone she had used for the last year of my father's life, the tone that made every insult sound like concern, and every lie sound like a painful truth she had no choice but to share. But I did not cry. I did not ask why. I did not throw the dollar back at her. I only folded the envelope closed and placed it beside my glass of untouched water. That disappointed her. I could see it. Vivian had spent months building a version of me that required an audience. In that version, I was unstable, greedy, emotional, resentful, too wounded by my parents' divorce to accept that my father had moved on. She had told relatives I only visited when I needed money. She had told board members I made my father anxious. She had told the house staff not to let me disturb him when his health declined, because stress could make his condition worse. And now, in the room where she expected me to finally prove her right, I gave her nothing. Elliot Graves cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but it changed the room. Vivian's eyes moved to him first, sharp and immediate. She did not look frightened, exactly. Vivian rarely looked frightened, but something in her mouth tightened, and for the first time that afternoon, her expression was not entirely under her control. Elliot adjusted his glasses and looked down at the papers before him. "Before we continue with the distribution of remaining personal property," he said, "there is an item listed in Mr. Whitmore's private instruction schedule that must be produced." Vivian's hand closed around the arm of my father's chair. "What item?" she asked. Elliot did not answer her at once. He opened the leather folder and removed a single sheet, older than the rest, with my father's signature at the bottom. "A locked walnut box," he said. Approximately 12 inches wide, brass corners, engraved initials on the lid. It was to be kept in Mr. Whitmore's study until the reading of the will. The room became too quiet. I remembered the box immediately. I had seen it once when I was 17, sitting on the highest shelf in my father's study, behind a row of old tax ledgers. When I asked him about it, he told me it held boring papers and secrets too dull for a teenager. Then he smiled and said that the most dangerous things in life were rarely hidden in safes. They were hidden in places people thought were too ordinary to search. Vivian laughed lightly, but the sound came out thin. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, Elliot. There are many boxes in this house." "This one is specifically described," Elliot said. "I handled the estate inventory myself," Vivian replied. "There was no such box in Richard's study." The way she said it was almost perfect. Sad enough for a widow, firm enough for a woman in control, final enough to discourage questions. But Elliot Graves had not spent 27 years as my father's attorney by being discouraged by beautiful women in expensive mourning clothes. He turned one page over. "That is unfortunate," he said, "because Mr. Whitmore's instruction states that if the box is missing, removed, damaged, concealed, or withheld by any beneficiary, The reading is to pause until its location is determined. Vivian's smile disappeared. My Uncle Robert frowned. Beneficiary? What does that mean? It means, Elliot said carefully, that the box is not sentimental property. It is part of the estate process. Vivian pushed her chair back slightly. This is absurd. Richard was ill when he signed half of these papers. He had moments of confusion. We all know that. That was the second time I almost reacted. Because I had heard that sentence before, too. Vivian had used it whenever my father contradicted her, whenever he asked to see me, whenever he wanted to review company documents she had suddenly started organizing for him. He was confused when he asked for his daughter. He was tired when he questioned the new bank authorizations. He was forgetful when he said he did not remember signing something. Elliot looked at her for a long moment. This instruction was signed 11 months before his death, Mrs. Whitmore. The room shifted again. Not physically, but emotionally. People who had been watching me now began watching Vivian. She noticed. I said I don't know where it is, she said. Elliot closed the folder halfway. Then I will ask the house manager. Vivian stood. There is no need to involve staff in a family matter. But the door had already opened. Mrs. Alvarez stepped into the dining room with both hands folded in front of her uniform. She had worked for my father since I was a child. She had taught me how to polish silver when I was 8, how to fold linen napkins when I was 10, and how to recognize when adults were lying by what they refused to look at when they spoke. For the last year, Vivian had treated her like a piece of furniture that could be moved, dismissed, or blamed. Elliot turned to her. Mrs. Alvarez, do you know the location of the locked walnut box described in Mr. Whitmore's instruction schedule? Mrs. Alvarez looked at Vivian first. That look told me everything. It was quick, frightened, and full of history. Yes, she said. I do. Vivian's face went pale beneath her makeup. Mrs. Alvarez continued before anyone could interrupt her. It was in Mr. Whitmore's study until yesterday evening. Mrs. Whitmore asked me to bring it down after dinner. She said it was old correspondence and that it needed to be removed before the family arrived. A low murmur went around the table. Vivian's voice sharpened. That is not true. Mrs. Alvarez swallowed. I'm sorry, ma'am. I carried it to the east sitting room. Then Mr. Graves called this morning and asked whether the box was still in the study. When I told him it was not, he asked me not to touch it again. Elliot's expression did not change. Where is it now? Mrs. Alvarez looked toward the hallway. In the coat closet near the service entrance. The room held its breath. Vivian moved first. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You are all acting as though I committed some crime because a housekeeper misplaced a box. No, Elliot said. We are acting as though Mr. Whitmore anticipated that someone might try to remove it. That sentence landed harder than the dollar. Vivian sat back down, but she no longer looked like a grieving widow. She looked like someone calculating exits. When Mrs. Alvarez returned carrying the walnut box, the entire room seemed to lean toward it. It was smaller than I remembered, dark wood polished by age, brass corners dulled at the edges, with my father's initials engraved on the lid, R.A.W. A small lock hung from the front. There was nothing dramatic about it. No jewels, no velvet, no cinematic glow. Just an old box carried in by a woman who looked like she wished she had never seen it. Elliot placed the box in the center of the table. Vivian stared at it like it had spoken. Do you have the key? He asked me. I blinked. Me? He nodded. Your father's instruction says the key was given to you. I almost said no. Then I remembered the last birthday card my father had sent me, 4 months before he died. Vivian had told everyone he was too weak to write, but the card had arrived anyway, mailed from a post office across town instead of from the house. Inside was no sentimental message, just one sentence in his slanted handwriting. Keep this somewhere she won't clean. At the time, I thought it was one of his strange jokes. Taped beneath the inside flap of the envelope had been a small brass key. I had placed it in the zippered pocket of my wallet and carried it for months without knowing why. I had almost thrown it away twice. My hands were steady when I opened my purse. Vivian watched me remove the key. For the first time since I had known her, she looked genuinely afraid. The lock clicked open. Inside the box was not money. That was the first surprise. No jewelry, no deed, no secret stack of bonds. Nothing that looked like the lost inheritance everyone in the room expected. There were 3 things inside. A sealed envelope with my name on it, a small digital recorder, and a red folder labeled in my father's handwriting. Receipts. My throat tightened when I saw the word. Not because it was dramatic, because it was so completely him. My father had built an empire out of paper trails. He used to say that memory was emotional, but documents were patient. If a person wanted to survive powerful people, he said, she needed to keep records before anyone knew there was a fight. Elliot removed the sealed envelope first. "This letter is addressed to Claire Whitmore," he said. Vivian immediately objected. "Personal letters should not be read aloud?" Elliot looked at me. "It is your choice." Every person in that room turned toward me. For months, Vivian had spoken for my father. Vivian had interpreted his moods, explained his decisions, filtered his calls, postponed my visits, and translated his silence into whatever benefited her. Now, the room was finally waiting for my voice. "Read it," I said. Elliot opened the envelope carefully. His voice softened as he began. "My dear Claire, if this letter is being read in that dining room, then Vivian did what I feared she would do. She gave you the dollar, and she tried to hide the box." The sound that came from Vivian was small, almost involuntary. Elliot continued, "I need you to understand something before anyone else speaks. The dollar was not your inheritance. It was a marker. I left it in the public will because I needed Vivian to believe she had won. If she behaved honorably, if she produced this box without resistance, the remaining process would be private. But if she humiliated you, concealed the box, or used my illness to turn the family against you, then I wanted every person in that room to hear the truth together." Nobody moved. My father's words filled the dining room like he had walked back into the house. I did not disinherit my daughter. I protected her from the woman who spent my final year trying to erase her. My aunt covered her mouth. Marcus stopped smiling. Vivian stood up so quickly, her chair struck the wall behind her. "This is disgusting," she said. "He was manipulated. Someone manipulated him." Elliot did not raise his voice. "Mrs. Whitmore, sit down." It was the first time I had ever heard anyone speak to her that way. She did not sit. Elliot placed the letter on the table and opened the red folder. "This folder contains supporting documentation attached to Mr. Whitmore's estate instructions," he said. "For the sake of clarity, I will summarize the relevant provisions before continuing." Vivian reached for her phone. Elliot looked at her. "If you are calling your attorney, I would advise you to tell him to come quickly." That was when I understood the box was not simply going to explain my father's intentions. It was going to destroy someone. The first document was a visitor log. For 6 months, I had been told my father was too weak to see me. I had driven to the mansion 7 times and been turned away by staff who looked embarrassed and said he was resting. Vivian told relatives I had stopped visiting because I was angry about money. But the log showed every visit, every time I arrived, every time I was refused entry, and every instruction given by Vivian to keep me away. The second document was a set of printed messages. Vivian had written to the night nurse, the house manager, and my father's driver with instructions that made the room colder with each line. "Do not allow Claire upstairs. Tell her he is sleeping. If she calls, say he is confused today. If Richard asks for her, tell him she was too busy to come." My cousin Marcus whispered, "Jesus." Vivian turned on him. "You don't understand the context." But Elliot was already on the third document. It was a pharmacy record, then a physician's note, then an email from my father to a private medical consultant asking whether his new sedatives could cause memory gaps. Vivian had told everyone that my father's confusion was part of his decline, but the notes suggested something different. His worst episodes began after a change in medication that Vivian had requested through a concierge doctor the family had never used before. I felt the room tilt. Not because I understood everything, but because I suddenly understood that my father had been fighting from inside a life Vivian controlled. He had not been silent because he forgot me. He had been documenting her. The digital recorder came last. Vivian said, "No, just that." One word. Elliot looked at her. "This recording was made by Mr. Whitmore in his own study. It is referenced in his affidavit and included in the estate file." "You cannot play that," she said. "I can," Elliot replied. "And under the circumstances, I should." He pressed the button. For 1 second, there was only static. Then my father's voice came through the small speaker, thinner than I remembered, but unmistakable. "Vivian, I am not signing another transfer." Her voice followed, smooth and impatient. "Richard, you already agreed. Claire is not capable of managing anything. You said that yourself." "I said she was hurt," my father answered. "Not incapable. She hates me. She will contest everything. She will ruin the foundation, the company, your legacy. My legacy is not yours to protect from my daughter. There was a pause, and then the sound of paper sliding across a desk. Vivian's voice changed. It lost the softness. You are making this very difficult. The doctors already agree you are having cognitive issues. If you want to spend your last months fighting everyone, I can make sure Claire is remembered as the reason. No one breathed. The recording continued. You kept her from me, my father said. I protected you from her. You lied. I managed a situation you were too weak to manage. Another pause. Then my father said the sentence that broke something inside me. If you hide the box, Vivian, you lose everything. The recorder clicked off. Vivian looked around the room, and for the first time, there was no performance left. No widow, no hostess, no grieving wife trying to maintain dignity. Just a woman whose private voice had entered a public room without permission. My Uncle Robert stood slowly. What does that mean, Elliot? Elliot opened the final section of the red folder. It means Mr. Whitmore amended his estate plan 12 months before his death. The public will, the one read today, governs certain symbolic distributions and personal items. The substantial estate was transferred into the Whitmore family trust. Vivian gripped the back of the chair. Elliot continued. Mrs. Whitmore was named as a lifetime beneficiary under specific conditions. Those conditions required her to preserve access between Mr. Whitmore and his daughter, cooperate with estate counsel, produce the locked box at the reading, and refrain from concealing documents or interfering with medical and financial records. Vivian's lips parted, but no sound came out. By removing the box from the study, Elliot said, denying its existence, restricting Claire's access to her father, and attempting to influence medical and estate records, Mrs. Whitmore triggered the forfeiture clause. My aunt whispered, Forfeiture? Elliot nodded. Vivian Whitmore is disqualified from receiving benefits under the trust. The room erupted. Vivian shouted that the clause was invalid. Robert demanded to see the documents. Marcus kept saying he didn't know. Mrs. Alvarez stood near the wall with tears in her eyes, and I sat there with the dollar beside my glass of water, finally understanding the shape of my father's last act. He had not given me $1 because I meant nothing. He had given me $1 so Vivian would show everyone exactly who she was. But Elliot was not finished. There is one more provision, he said. That quieted the room faster than shouting could have. He turned to me. Upon disqualification of Vivian Whitmore as beneficiary, control of the Whitmore family trust passes to Claire Whitmore as sole trustee. The mansion, the lake property, voting control of the company shares, the family foundation, and all restricted investment accounts are to be managed under her authority. For the first time that day, I could not keep my face still. Vivian stared at me as if I had stolen something from her. That was the strangest part. Even then, after every lie had been placed in front of her, she still believed the estate had been hers, and that I had somehow taken it by existing. You knew, she said. Her voice was low now. I looked at the dollar on the table. No, I said, I didn't. And that was the truth. I had not known about the trust. I had not known about the recording. I had not known that my father had built a legal trap inside his own funeral arrangements. But I had known enough not to perform for Vivian. I had known enough to keep the key. I had known enough to sit still when she wanted me to break. Elliot slid another envelope toward me. Your father also left private instructions for you after the reading. I did not open it immediately. I was afraid that if I saw his handwriting again, I would lose the control Vivian had been trying to take from me all afternoon. So I kept my hand on top of the envelope and listened as the consequences began unfolding around me. Vivian's attorney was called. The family accountant was called. The trust officer was called. The company's general counsel requested copies of the documents within minutes. By evening, Vivian's access to estate accounts had been frozen. By the next morning, she was removed from the foundation board pending investigation. By the end of the week, the concierge doctor who changed my father's medication was answering questions he did not seem prepared for. And the night nurse had given a sworn statement confirming that Vivian instructed staff to keep me away, even when my father asked for me by name. But the moment people remember is not the legal one. They remember Vivian standing in the dining room, surrounded by flowers she had ordered for a man she thought she had outplayed, watching the old walnut box turn her victory into evidence. She tried to leave before the second attorney arrived. Mrs. Alvarez stopped her at the hallway table and said very quietly, Mrs. Whitmore, the coat closet is this way. It was the smallest sentence in the world. It humiliated Vivian more than any shouting could have. 3 weeks later, I returned to the mansion alone. Not as a grieving daughter begging to be let upstairs. Not as the unstable woman Vivian had described to the family. I entered through the front door with the trust officer, the house manager, and Elliot Graves beside me. The staff had placed my father's portrait back in his study, where it belonged, away from Vivian's lilies and the dining room where she had tried to turn his death into theater. His desk was exactly as I remembered it. Leather blotter, fountain pen, brass lamp, the faint smell of cedar and paper. On the shelf behind it, there was an empty space where the walnut box had been. I stood there for a long time before opening the private envelope Elliot had given me. My father's final letter was shorter than I expected. Claire, if you are reading this, then the worst of my fear was true, but so was the best of my faith in you. I knew she would expect you to fight in the room. I knew she would expect anger, tears, accusations. I also knew you had your mother's strength and my patience, which made you more dangerous than either of us. I am sorry I could not undo the pain before I left, but I could leave the truth where only your silence would reach it. I read that sentence twice. Only your silence would reach it. That was when I finally cried. Not in the dining room. Not in front of Vivian. Not while holding the dollar. I cried in my father's study, with the door closed, because the man I thought had abandoned me had spent his final year leaving a trail back to the truth. The dollar is still with me. I framed it. People think I framed it as a trophy, but I didn't. I framed it as a reminder. Vivian thought $1 was the smallest thing she could give me. She thought it would make me look unwanted, erased, punished, and poor in front of everyone who mattered. She never understood my father. He knew the smallest thing in the room could carry the largest trap. In the end, Vivian did not lose everything because I screamed. She did not lose because I begged the family to believe me. She lost because she touched the one thing she had been instructed not to hide, lied about it in front of witnesses, and opened the door to every receipt my father had saved before he died. That is the part people like to forget about powerful liars. They do not fall when someone accuses them. They fall when the paper trail gets tired of waiting. My stepmother gave me $1 from my father's will. She smiled when I opened it. She watched the room decide I had been discarded. Then the lawyer opened the box she tried to hide. And by the time he finished reading what was inside, the dollar was the only thing Vivian had left the power to give me.